And this is our military base. And already, if we give the Chagos Islands to Mauritius says they'll lease us our own base for about £9 billion over 10 years.
Kennedy's brutal remarks on the UK's Chagos Islands deal have started a political firestorm.
We are paying somebody to take British sovereign territory when we don't have to.
Why? Just explain to me how that idiot Lammy can even begin to justify.
Labour's leadership is scrambling as Kennedy's brutal truth bombs rip through their Chagos Island deal.
It seems that the UK government is tripping over itself to try and give away this territory, but not just give it away for the privilege of also giving away money. Billions upon billions of pounds.
Kennedy has slammed the UK's decision as a historic disgrace that will haunt them for generations.
This is India. This is China. Right here, these are the Chagos Islands. Right now owned by the United Kingdom. And America, the United States of America, with your tax dollars, has a very important military base on the Chagos Islands, on an island called Diego Garcia.
Labour is facing a furious backlash for their shambolic handling of the Chagos Islands and shameless betrayal of the British public.
The folks at the United Nations, with their whey protein powder and man purses, they say, bad United Kingdom, bad United Kingdom. You're a bunch of colonialists. Give it back. Give the Chagos Islands back.
With Kennedy's harsh rebuke gaining traction, the UK's handling of the Chagos Islands is being exposed as a catastrophic blunder.
And the new government in the United Kingdom said, oh, we feel so guilty, we're going to give it back. We're going to give it back. And our Air Force base with it, which we use to rearm and restock our submarines in Indochina and in the Indian Ocean to combat China. This kind of stupid takes a plan, folks.
Kennedy's fiery remarks about Chagos Island are shaking things up as the deal could cause a serious political mess between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer.
So, okay, we feel guilty. We're going to give it back. We're going to give it to Mauritius, and we're going to start paying Mauritius £9 billion over 10 years. And you know who went along with it? The prior administration. Now, I've talked to President Trump about this, and I've talked to Marco Rubio about this, our esteemed new Secretary of State. And I'm hoping they're going to do something about it. The United Nations has no jurisdiction over the United Kingdom or us in America.
This isn't just a bad deal, it's an economic black hole that will suck billions from British taxpayers with no end in sight.
Already China is trying to be Mauritius's best friend. And I don't have anything against the government of Mauritius. They're wonderful people. I understand they want the money. They want our money. They want your money. They want us to pay them for our own military base. We need to stop this deal. President Trump and Secretary Rubio need to pick up the phone and call Prime Minister Starmer in the United Kingdom and say to...
The Labour is practically gift-wrapping a sovereign territory and handing it over to Mauritius on a silver platter.
Stop dipping into your ketamine stash. Put down the bomb. We need this military base to combat China. Don't do it. And if the president will do that and the Secretary of State will do that, I believe Mr. Starmer, who tried to ram this through the week before President Biden took office but was stopped, I believe that he will give in.
The Chagos Islands deal is shaping up to be one of the biggest geopolitical giveaways in modern British history. It is nothing less than a political earthquake ready to shake Britain.
But our struggle with China is serious. It's serious as 4 heart attacks and a stroke. And it is bone deep, down to the marrow, stupid for us, because of guilt over colonialism, to bow to the wishes of the United Nations and give a military base that we built to Mauritius.
Handing over the Chagos Islands isn't just a loss of territory, it's a stupid blunder that weakens Britain on the world stage.
And it is not just any military base. It is an extraordinarily important military base. Our military base is one of the few in the world where our military can reload submarines. Hugely important. Our military base on Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands houses a number of Navy ships.
This deal is an outright disaster, and let's be clear, it's not just the UK that's failed here, it's the failure of weak leadership, a failure driven by Labour's blind obsession with appeasement. The UN isn't off the hook either. They've been too busy pushing their decolonization fantasy while completely ignoring the real-world consequences. This isn't some grand moral victory, it's reckless political incompetence, and it's putting our allies and global security at risk.
We in the United Kingdom, I'll explain why the UK is involved in a moment, we have to work hard every day to police our military base, not just the base itself, but the land, or the water surrounding it. Because China knows how important this military base is to the security of the world. China is constantly sending craft trying to spy on our military base there. And we and the United Kingdom, again, I will mention in a second, explain in a second, the United Kingdom's relevance, are constantly having to patrol and fight off the espionage of China.
Kennedy is furious that the UK and UN are considering handing over such a strategically important spot to Mauritius. This move is pure stupidity. The Chagos Islands, especially Diego Garcia, are a vital military base crucial for global defense, and giving it up to Mauritius is like throwing away a golden ticket. The UK and UN are making a terrible decision that could come back to haunt them in the future.
They said the United Kingdom is a colonizer. And the United Kingdom, the people of the United Kingdom are bad people. Now remember, this is coming from the United Nations. This is the same United Nations that has the following countries on its Human Rights Council: Somalia, Iraq, Venezuela, China. That's who thinks we ought to get rid of this military base. Okay,
There's a real fear that China is lurking, ready to pounce on this power vacuum. If the UK lets go of the Chagos Islands, it's practically rolling out the red carpet for Beijing to expand its grip in the Indian Ocean. China has been making bold strategic moves in the region, and with Diego Garcia slipping away, the door is wide open for them to plant their own military or economic stronghold, right where the UK used to stand firm.
Headlines again because Sir Keir Starmer's deal has been delayed over, well, a whole host of reasons really, but it boils down to a lot of concerns over Chinese influence.
Yeah, back in October, Number 10 announced that it would hand over the sovereignty of the island to Mauritius, where there is a joint US and UK military base.
Well, Donald Trump's not happy. The president-elect, of course, is beginning celebrations this weekend ahead of the inauguration on Monday, but he seems to be putting his foot down.
The British public is already boiling with frustration over tax increases, squeezing hard-working families, an inheritance tax that punishes success, disastrous economic policies, and scandal after scandal exposing Labour's hypocrisy. From Starmer's lies and vague excuses to endless blunders, the cracks in this government are widening. Labour is more divided than ever, pushing a high-tax, low-growth, no-reform agenda while Parliament descends into chaos. And now, the Chagos Islands fiasco looks like the final nail in the coffin for Starmer's days in office, as public outrage boils over at yet another national betrayal.
So the negotiations started under the Conservatives, concluded under Labour. They're blaming each other for them apparently going wrong. So there's a vital naval anchorage there and an airfield. It's British, a bit like Ascension Island. The Americans use it as well. And we are going to pay, or we were going to pay, for the privilege of giving this away to Mauritius, which is 1,300 miles away. So they're not exactly near neighbours, are they?
With the UK backing down under Labour's weak leadership and the US preoccupied, China could seize this golden opportunity to tighten its grip on the region. And let's not pretend this is some far-fetched scenario. China has been aggressively expanding for years, from militarizing artificial islands in the South China Sea to buying up critical infrastructure across the Indian Ocean. Now, thanks to Labour's reckless willingness to hand over the Chagos Islands, Beijing could soon be knocking at the door, ready to plant its own military foothold right where the UK should have stood firm.
Of course, Starmer wants to get on with Trump, even after all the things that they've said about him. He recognises Trump is the guy. And now it's on hold, and we'll have to see what happens. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, why was there this determination to get rid of it anyway? I mean, try and sort of hold on to Diego Garcia under a 99-year lease, but it would open territorial waters back up to China, which would be of...
The deal is a pure disgrace and is estimated to cost billions of dollars that could otherwise be spent on healthcare, education, or infrastructure. At a time when many citizens are struggling, this feels like a slap in the face. And while politicians are quick to justify the decision, the reality is that ordinary people will bear the financial burden.
The Chagos Islands, they've had no indigenous population. There were freed slaves who moved there. Now, to be fair, we moved them all off in the 1960s. Many of them came here. Some of them went to Mauritius, where I gather they weren't treated very well. So I think this is a sort of almost a sort of knee-jerk anti-imperialist sort of thing, following this ruling from the International Court of Justice in The Hague, a non-binding resolution, which successive governments seem to have gone with, and of course they're now blaming each other for it going wrong.
Billions of dollars, a significant burden at a time when many are struggling to make ends meet. With these funds being funneled into international agreements, many are left wondering how this will affect their daily lives. The immediate concern is that essential public services like healthcare, education, and social support might suffer as the government diverts funds into this costly deal.
Yeah, it isn't an odd thing for a Labour government to do. You would imagine that they want to, if it deserves to be given away, then they would want to be seen to be giving it away. But I can't understand, given that we have a military base there with the Americans, why were the Americans not consulted over this?
Yes, very good point, Anne. And I think the Biden administration was rumoured to just be willing to let us get on with it.
Labour's shameless sellout of British territory raises a chilling question. How far are they willing to go in their betrayal of the British people? Handing over the Chagos Islands isn't just bad policy, it's a shameful abandonment of national interests. Since when does a government get to give away sovereign land like it's some disposable asset? And for what? To appease international bureaucrats who couldn't care less about Britain's security? This isn't diplomacy, it's a hypocritical surrender.
What the hell were you thinking about with the Chagos Islands, Diego Garcia? The honest truth is that our government is getting off to the worst possible start with the incoming Trump administration. And my other worry, if we pivot towards the European Union, that makes getting a trade deal of some kind with Trump's America even more difficult. I suggest Keir Starmer has a long, hard think over the weekend.
The long-term effects of this deal could ripple through the economy in ways that aren't immediately clear. The billions of dollars that are going into the Chagos deal may lead to cuts in public sector jobs or delayed infrastructure projects. Citizens could face a future with fewer resources available for community projects, transport, or health initiatives. While the government may promise that the deal will bring benefits down the line, the truth is that the immediate impact will likely be felt through reduced public services or higher taxes that will weigh on the taxpayer.
Yes, the Prime Minister in Mauritius, they rejected the treaty, but it's not over yet because they can do another treaty anytime. So that's what we want, is the UK should refuse further concession and stop negotiation, and that instead focusing of negotiation that island is for British sovereignty already. Why they are still doing negotiation?
The Mauritius government is delaying the Chagos Island because now they want more billions as they know how they can cash the situation. With billions of taxpayer dollars at stake, many citizens are worried about the financial burden this agreement could create. The government has likely realized that moving forward with the deal could cause widespread protests and unrest.
The plan that they put in place for Chagosian arriving in the UK, they are just silent. It looks like they have their agenda already and they have their own plan. They are not listening to their public, and this is really, really concern. If a government is not listening to their public, the more of the people in British is telling them they need to look after British citizens first in their country.
Yeah.
And we are overseas territory that belong to UK. So look for all the overseas territory.
To nobody's surprise, Starmer's plan turned out to be a massive failure. The deal is yet postponed as an attempt to buy time, allowing for public opinion to shift in a more favorable direction. The fear of alienating voters who are already concerned about the country's financial stability is likely playing a large part in the government's decision to delay.
And we kick off the show today with the news that the Attorney General of Mauritius is today flying to London to extract more concessions from the British government over money and territory.
Well, cabinet minutes from the East African country, seen by GB News, declare the commitment and resolve of Mauritius to end this long battle for sovereignty.
Yes, just how much more money could the country demand, and could we lose rights to access that crucial UK-US military base on the islands?
Well, should we speak to our...
Recently, things have gotten even more complicated because China has started showing more interest in the region. The idea is that as China continues to expand its influence globally, it might want a piece of the action in the Indian Ocean. Some experts think China could be eyeing the Chagos Islands, especially after Mauritius won a major legal battle in the UN, pushing the UK to give up control.
Mauritius might want to make it down to just a 50-year lease. That the Mauritian Prime Minister today met with groups in Mauritius that want it to be a 0-year lease, that want Mauritius to take over the base immediately. I mean, all the domestic pressure in Mauritius seems to be that there shouldn't be any British or American presence on these islands at all. And yet, that's clearly not what Donald Trump will think. I mean, have the Mauritians really shot themselves in the feet here by delaying it?
For Kennedy, this deal with Mauritius feels like a ticking time bomb. He's worried that if the islands end up under Mauritius's control, the US could lose its grip on that key military outpost. And with China lurking in the background, it's even worse. If China gets its hands on the Chagos Islands, or even just uses the political instability surrounding them to its advantage, it could completely shift the balance of power in the region.
Doing things which are just bonkers, and people find them almost impossible to believe. Why on earth are we giving up sovereign territory against the wishes of the islanders who want to stay with us when we need it for really important military reasons? And why on earth would we raise more taxes to give the money away to pay for it?
The idea that a deal made with Mauritius could hand over one of the most strategically valuable locations in the world to China is something he can't stomach. He feels like the whole thing is being brushed off as a minor issue when it could shift the entire global order.
We should just tell them to go away. We don't have to pay them. We don't have to rush. We don't have to give them anything. Just tell them to go away.
That is seemingly what happened under the previous government when David Cameron was Foreign Secretary and seemed to sort of put an end to this deal. But let's not forget that the negotiations began in 2022. Liz Truss, then Prime Minister, cornered at the UN General Assembly by the then Mauritian Prime Minister, saying
It all comes down to the blatantly obvious fact that Kennedy was not just thinking about the military implications. He's thinking about how this could weaken America's position in the world. The US already has enough to deal with when it comes to China's growing power. Losing Diego Garcia or seeing it slip into China's sphere of influence would be a major blow. He's angry because this isn't just a land dispute. This is a game changer for America's future in the Indo-Pacific.
Now, as I said at the start there, Britain has reportedly been asked to pay up billions of pounds of taxpayers' cash as part of the deal more like a surrender, to hand back the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. It's been revealed in the Times. Talks have stalled over the 99-year lease of a crucial Anglo-American airbase on the island, which sources have suggested Mauritius demanded £800 million a year for.
As Kennedy is absolutely fuming about this deal. He's been watching the whole Chagos Island situation unfold, and now that Mauritius and the UK have signed this agreement, he can't help but feel like the whole thing is about to blow up in America's face. He knows how crucial the US military base on Diego Garcia is for global security and power projection.
This comes as Sir Keir Starmer is facing calls to abandon his surrender of the islands altogether after the new Mauritian government rejected another proposal deal last week. Now, Matthew, if Nigel Farage is right and the Trump administration say, I don't know what Sir Keir Starmer is doing, I'm going to start calling him Surrender Starmer, then this ain't going to get sealed on the dotted line, is it?
Well, I think it isn't. I think that's probably what the government wants. And so this all stems from the fact that the negotiations...
Behind closed doors, Starmer's government is likely weighing the economic and diplomatic consequences of upsetting the US and losing control over Diego Garcia, the UK's crucial military outpost. It's no secret that giving up the islands could have long-term consequences for the UK's military strategy and its relationship with the United States. But with growing pressure from human rights groups and international bodies, Starmer knows they're at a crossroads. The deal has to be seen as progress, even if it means selling out the UK's strategic interests in the long run. The reality is that the Brits are sick and tired of Starmer's stupid mistakes.
Is used by the US government as a military base for its Navy ships and long-range bomber aircraft. In a nutshell, the plan was to give the island to Mauritius and then rent it back off them. The Chagosians weren't consulted, which was the problem the first time round. Can you imagine giving your house away and then paying to rent it back? I mean, what kind of a deal is that? And guess who'll be paying the rent? Muggins here, you and me. Why on earth would you want to do that?
The UK's stance was pretty clear for a long time that they were not going to give up the islands, right? But as pressure from the United Nations and the International Court of Justice mounted, it was impossible to ignore any longer. The UN had already slapped down a resolution saying the UK needed to hand the islands back to Mauritius, and the ICJ even backed it up, calling the UK's occupation illegal. And guess what? That made the UK finally sit up and take notice. This deal is a clear sign that they don't care about taxpayers' hard-earned money.
Giving up these islands in this way amounts to ultimately risking them falling into the hands of the Chinese. Thankfully, our friends across the pond can see that. If our politicians are too stupid to see the value of keeping the Chagos Isles and don't realise what that does to our standing around the world and how it weakens our position militarily, and when it comes to the Falklands and Gibraltar, then thank God for Donald Trump, Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson. Thank God we have a few friends in the US who can see the wood from the trees. It's hilarious.
After a whole lot of back and forth, the UK announced they were ready to talk about giving the islands back to Mauritius, and it was a huge shift in political strategy. Honestly, the whole situation showed how much international pressure can make even the most stubborn of powers rethink their moves. It's not just about giving the islands back. It's about owning up to the past, fixing historical wrongs, and admitting that no one's above international law, no matter how powerful they might think they are.
So what do you think? Come on, look, this deal, we know it was started by the Conservatives. They were useless. Nobody's saying they were good. But it was not necessary for the Labour government to continue with it. Does it make sense?
Absolutely no choice. I mean, the worst original Diego Garcia Chagos Island deals was, of course, the beloved Margaret Thatcher in 1980, when she handed over the atoll to make an unsinkable aircraft carrier for the United States for their games in Asia. No problems with that.
While the UK's move to return the Chagos Islands shows a shift, the deal still isn't finalised. Despite the pressure, there's a lot left to negotiate, especially with increased demands from Mauritius and the Chagosian people for full sovereignty and reparations. The path ahead is uncertain, and how the UK handles these next steps will be crucial. Will they uphold their promises or try to stall once again? The coming months would be very critical in determining the future of Britain and how much more betrayal can the public take before the story ends. This isn't just about one deal, it's about a government that has lost its way. And with outrage boiling over, it's only a matter of time before the British people make their voices heard loud and clear. So if you love Britain and want to save it, please like and subscribe.